If I told you that one of California's largest lakes was never supposed to exist, would you believe me? Because out in the middle of the Sonoran Desert, surrounded by dusty mountains and palm trees, there's this giant, shimmering body of water called the Salton Sea. But here's the twist. It's not some ancient geological wonder carved by nature over thousands of years. Nope. It's basically a 100-year-old accident that's been slowly falling apart ever since. And the story of how it got here is wild. Back in the early 1900s, engineers had a simple goal: bring water from the Colorado River to irrigate farmland in California's Imperial Valley. This wasn't just about growing a few crops. The Imperial Valley was being marketed as the next big agricultural gold mine. The soil was rich, the climate perfect for year-round farming. All they needed was water. So they built a canal system to divert part of the river. Seems straightforward, except their engineering marvel was basically a dirt ditch with a lot of hope and not much reinforcement. In 1905, Mother Nature decided to test their work. A massive flood roared down the Colorado River, and instead of politely staying in its channel, the river punched right through those fragile canals. The result? A roaring, unstoppable flow of into into a dry desert basin known as the Salton Sea. And here's the kicker. It didn't stop for almost 2 years. 2 whole years. By the time they finally diverted the water back to its proper course in 1907, the Salton Sea had been born, an inland lake covering over 400 square miles. Farmers were furious about losing their land, but nature had just created the desert's biggest swimming pool. And for decades, people treated it like a desert paradise. In the 1950s and 60s, the Salton Sea was the place to be. Picture this. Speedboat races slicing through blue water, fishing tournaments pulling in massive corvina, and celebrities water skiing under endless sunshine. Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, and even the Beach Boys all made appearances here. Developers jumped in fast, building resorts along the shore with names like Bombay Beach and Desert Shores. Families rolled in with RVs, vacation homes sprouted up, and the water was stocked with fish to make sure every weekend was a fishing weekend. It was marketed as Palm Springs, but with its own ocean. But here's the problem. The Salton Sea doesn't have a natural outlet. Every drop of water that goes in, stays in. And in a desert, where evaporation works overtime, that's not great news. By the 1970s, cracks in the paradise were showing, and I don't just mean in the hotel paint. The lake's salinity started climbing. Why? Because when water evaporates, the salt stays behind. Year after year, with farm runoff pouring in and no fresh outflow, the salt levels rose higher and higher. But it wasn't just salt in the water. That farm runoff brought fertilizers, pesticides, and other chemicals. Fish started dying. Not just a few here and there, but massive die-offs that left the shoreline covered in silvery corpses. The birds that relied on the lake, pelicans, cormorants, egrets, started dying too, victims of botulism and other toxins. And the smell? Oh, the smell. Imagine a mix of rotting fish, sulfur, and wet dog magnified by 110-degree heat. One by one, resorts shut their doors. Property values plummeted. And the once buzzing shoreline became a ghostly stretch of abandoned marinas and sun-bleached signs pointing to nowhere. If the dead fish and bad smell weren't enough, the shrinking lake brought a fresh nightmare. As the shoreline receded, it exposed a lakebed coated in decades of toxic buildup: arsenic, selenium, pesticide residue. When the desert winds pick up, all of that turns into airborne dust that drifts into nearby towns. Breathing it in? Not exactly a wellness retreat. And yet, thousands of people still live along the shore. Places like Bombay Beach and Salton City aren't just ghost towns. They've evolved into something stranger. Drive to the eastern shore today, and Bombay Beach greets you like no other desert town. Once a crumbling resort community, it's now a bizarre mix of art installation, survival experiment, and social commentary. The annual Bombay Beach Biennale has transformed the abandoned streets into an open-air gallery. We're talking giant metal sculptures rising out of the sand, painted pianos sitting in the middle of empty lots, and entire houses turned into surreal art pieces. It's part Burning Man, part Mad Max, part small-town Americana, with sunsets so vivid they look fake. Walk toward the beach, and the ground crunches under your feet, not sand, but salt-crusted debris. The skeletal remains of old docks reach into still water, and pelicans glide overhead, oblivious to the strange new human energy that's taken root here. For all its problems, the Salton Sea is still a crucial stopover for birds on the Pacific Flyway. In peak migration seasons, you can see thousands of snow geese, avocets, and herons resting on its shores. Environmental groups have been fighting for decades to save at least part of the habitat. Plans have included shrinking the lake into smaller managed pools, building artificial wetlands, and diverting just enough water to keep dust levels down. The state of California has started implementing some of these ideas, but progress is slow and the clock is ticking. Walk along the shore today and you'll see a strange mix of beauty and decay. The surrounding mountains blush pink at sunset. The water still glitters like a jewel under the desert sun. But at your feet, the sand is actually millions of pulverized fish bones. You pass rusting street signs pointing toward marinas that no longer exist, and motels with peeling paint that once promised waterfront luxury. It's haunting. It's also oddly peaceful. Honestly? Yes, if you're curious and a little adventurous. The Salton Sea isn't your typical California getaway, but it's a fascinating chapter of the state's history. You can wander through Bombay Beach's art scene, visit bubbling mud volcanoes just south of the lake, soak in nearby natural hot springs, or make a quirky pit stop at the International Banana Museum. Just be prepared for the smell, and maybe bring a bandana. Because the Salton Sea might not be glamorous anymore, but it's unforgettable. A shimmering reminder that sometimes the most fascinating places on Earth aren't the ones nature planned, but the ones we accidentally created.